Welcome to Hackon Online. On your right-hand side, you have the opportunity to ask Daniel questions, so if you have any, please enter them there. It's a pleasure for me to present Daniel. Welcome to Hackon.
Thank you for the introduction. So let's kick off the presentation. Today we gonna see how to catch high fidelity threat intelligence in the wild. So when we're talking about threat intelligence, most of us know that IP addresses, hashes, malware samples are like threat intelligence data. But today we are going to look more into the things that are being executed by the malicious attackers, so their behaviors, what they are doing, and try to learn something out of this. So, few words about me. You can reach me on those public channels if you would like to. I'm not that popular on social media. I'm not that interested in social media, but here and then I post something, and you can also reach me there. I started my career as a programmer and then switched to pen testing and security because I found that programming is, for me at least, boring. You don't have this adrenaline rush that you have in security, but it depends on the person. Then, after about 7 years, I switched to security research, and shortly after that, joined the Concha SOC, which I'm still currently working in. I first was a security analyst, tried to learn as much as possible on the defensive side because I had experience on the offensive side. And now again, I'm more on the offensive side, and I do red teaming and pen testing. And I also jump occasionally on incident response. So you would not believe how these two areas fulfill each other. So if you learn something from incident response, you can use it in red teaming, and of course you can use it in blue teaming in defense and prevention. So yeah, in the meantime, if there are any questions, you can write it on the chat. I only understand Slovenian and English, maybe a little bit German. But that's it. So if you keep those languages in the chat, it would be great. And I will try to answer the questions after the presentation as much as possible. Okay. So today we gonna talk about threat intelligence, high fidelity threat intelligence data, and how to catch them in the wild. Threat intelligence data, as I said, you think about hashes, you think about IP addresses, but you can think of techniques, for example, that you have in the MITRE attack matrix, and those techniques are not that frequently changed by the attackers. It gives even more value to the defensive side, and if you try to catch an attacker, it is more beneficial if you know what they are going to execute than to try to catch a hash or an IP address, because this kind of threat intelligence data can change very easily. So we will look into two use cases in the wild, and those use cases are from personal experience. The first one is a Cisco bug that goes by this tag you can see on the slide, and this bug had assigned two CVEs, and I will talk about how I felt this exploitation in firsthand, and I will also talk about a novel technique which I found in credential dumping. So in incident response, I mean the attackers have been doing credential dumping, but they did use some kind of novel exploitation technique there. So both of those two use cases are being executed in the wild, and what is mean to be in the wild? The wild can be sometimes tough. here is a spoiler alert for those who didn't see the movie. Uh, I apologize. One of those guys doesn't make it. All the respect here. And based on the image, you will probably say that the left one didn't make it. The conditions in the wild can be dangerous, and you need to be very cautious when you do threat hunting and threat intelligence gathering in the wild. But what do you need to do it? Of course, time and money is always a factor here. You need to time. You need to have time. You need to have money to buy hardware or cloud resources if you do it in the cloud, and also retention. I will talk about retention a little bit later. And of course, you need knowledge, flexibility, patience, willpower, and whatever keeps you driving. Some kind of motivation and vision which you need to have to catch high fidelity threat intelligence in the wild. So we're gonna look into two use cases. One is a honeypot, which I was able to set up and catch the exploitation of the Cisco bug. And the other use case is something that we learned in doing incident response. And as I mentioned already, this was a novel technique for credential dumping. The third use case, it's not something which I can talk about first-handed. A lot of security researchers did this. They infiltrated into the dark and published some valuable information out of it. And we as Defender can learn a lot out of this. For example, this is a story about initial access broker, which is named, I think his nickname is Vaza Vaka. I don't know if I pronounced it correctly, but he goes with different nicknames like Babuk, Boris Yeltsin, and things like that. And the story behind it was that this initial access broker was doxed or discovered by Brian Cripps. I think it was 2022. And after that, he was publicly known. But then also the war in Russia started, in Ukraine. And this initial access broker was based in Russia. So you can imagine that the Russian were not that good at handing over their hackers in new days. So he publicly also said that the war that happened was something good for him. And it's interesting what he talks about, because you can see the link on the slides. There's an interview done by Dmitry Smilayanets. I don't know if I pronounced it correctly, but that's a Record the Future. I think it's kind of a high-ranked employee there. Maybe the director. I don't know. What I'm trying to say here, it's actually that it's quite interesting what he said about, or the way he is thinking. For example, he said that we are overthinking things on the defensive side and security. We're thinking about APT, different kind of groups, different kind of attack matrix and things like that. But in fact, behind all that are the same people. They just start a new project. They shut it down because they got busted. Some people got arrested, and other people just move it and create a new project. And we think about another APT group. And he's kind of predictive when he says that ransomware will be dead in 3 years. It doesn't seem like that for now. And what he also says is that he doesn't actually use 0 days or buy 0 days or find 0 days, invest time into them, because every time a proof of concept gets published on GitHub, he just takes the proof of concept, scans the internet, and use it. And for example, for the Fortinet VPN CV that was around back then, he could only manage to exploit 3% of the exposed firewalls. So he had to have the capability and necessity to breach into the systems because there were too many. And what we can learn from this is whenever a proof of concept gets published and it has high criticality, like remote code execution, we need to patch it. And of course, then the time race or the rat race begins. So we can learn a lot about this. Now let's move to the first use case that we were able to catch in the wild. So this kind of use case was very rich in terms of learning for us, but also we could use it for the defensive or preventive side. What happened was that Cisco Talos published on October 16 that some kind of threat actor is exploiting Cisco devices in the wild. And they identified actually two CVs that were assigned to this bug. And the first CV allowed on authenticated attackers or remote attacker privilege level 15 access to the device. And the second one allowed on web user interface user, so one that's authenticated to the web interface to execute commands with elevated privilege, so root privileges. The thing which kind of bothered me was that we didn't know when the fixes will be available. They actually published the fixes on October 22nd, but at October 16, we didn't know what's going to happen. The only recommendation was disable the web interface, and that was not good for me. And what I tried to do then is set up a honeypot to catch the exploitation in the wild and try to understand it, what the hackers have been doing, and also try to figure out how to prevent this and try to consult our customers how they can defend themselves. So looking around how to set up a honeypot, I mean, you have basically two options. You can have hardware or you can do it in the cloud. To use hardware and some kind of private company and expose the company to a risk in their IP address space, it's not that recommended. To do it home, also not that recommended. You don't know what the guys have for the exploits and how do they manage to get into, and you need to make sure that the threat is contained and doesn't spread. So cloud is kind of a native choice to do the honeypot. And it turned out that on Azure Marketplace, you had the Cisco Catalyst 8000V Edge software available. And I published the honeypot version 1, which was the standalone Cisco switch. It just stood there. It didn't do anything. I didn't configure it. It was default setup. And it was publicly available. The web user interface was publicly available. But soon I discovered that the logging capabilities are not that great because the exploitation, I assumed that it's a web interface and nobody catch the exploit, that the exploitation happened in post requests, so in the post body. And the only option which I discovered on Cisco was to capture the PCAP file, which is by default was, I think, 10 megabytes. And you need to do it over and over again. And you have the logs, which are only the GET requests and the URLs that are being called. So actually, it was maybe some of you know how to do it better on Cisco because I'm not good at Cisco. But what I go to was the version 2 of the honeypot. I introduced an Nginx reverse proxy, And I configured the reverse proxy to catch also post requests, and I connected it to Azure Log Analytics workspace to make sure that when the attacker erased the data or also breached maybe the NGX proxy, I will still have the data what has been posted to the web server, to the reverse proxy and to the Cisco appliance. So 2 version of the honeypot, and I'm still wondering why we don't have by default solutions like you have Apache Nginx, ES servers, and other web servers, and they just don't lock by default post requests. I mean, I get it. Well, back then, resources like disk space performance was critical, but today, at you don't have this kind of limitation, and I think we should do better here. I think that all the solutions which are on the web should by default handle logging and post requests. It's the minimum what we can do right now to ease our pain when it comes to at the cyber world. So let's talk about MyFile and the story of retention. You can see here the log analytics workspace table. So we have NGX access table, and what you can see, the default settings is 90 days of retention. So I was a little bit lazy. My honeypot got triggered on 28th of October, and I started to present, try to prepare the presentation on 26th of October, January, sorry. So if you do the math, you will come roughly to 91 days, and meaning that I somehow forgot about the retention, and there were no logs in my log analytics workspace. Probably I set up the honeypot between 22nd October and 28th, somewhere here, and it just the time got by, and I forgot about the retention, the default retention. I lost all the data, but luckily I was that alert and did some notes, and I was able to write everything down what the attackers did actually execute to compromise my honeypot. Talking about the timeline, you saw that on October 16, Cisco Talos published that exploitation is happening. On 22nd, patches started rolling out, and what did other publish on this bug was the guys from Horizon 3 talked about some theories where the exploitation could happen. So they did the patch diffing of 2 different versions of the software and try to identify where the exploitation of the vulnerability could happen. And on October 30, they catch the first proof of concept for the first CVE, so the one that allows some unauthenticated remote attacker to get privileged access to the device. So they published their proof of concept, and it was great work. What I did, or my timeline was, I set up a honeypot, and I also did the patch diffing on October 25. So I got 2 images, one with a patch and one without the patch, and I compared 2 sites and tried to identify where the exploitation did happen. I also set up the second version of the honeypot between that time, and then I was waiting. And of course, my honeypot got triggered on October 28th, and I was on weekend. So they hit the honeypot around Friday night, and I was away from keyboard. So you need to expect the unexpected, and the bad guys will hit you when you have vacations, when you have honeymoons, when you have Christmas and things like that. So I was on weekend, and it was the weekend before November 1st. So you need to pay respect to that people. And I was away from the keyboard, and I miss all the fun. Just to prove to you that I'm not lying, you can see here my Twitter or X post about patch diffing. So when I analyzed two images and laid it side by side, I found that the IPv6 validation function has been patched. And at that time, I didn't assume that two CVEs were actually inside this bug. And I mixed things up and thought that the first CV was responsible for this fix was responsible for the first CV, but it was actually for the second CV. So if an user that has access to the web UI can execute root commands on the device. So looking at the patch, it was very easily or kind of not that hard to find out where you could introduce a comment. So you could escape the filter by adding a carriage return or a semicolon, and you can execute then the comment as root on the device. Here is the blog, the Twitter post I did on November 1st. It was almost at 10 p.m. My honeypot got triggered on October 28th. I missed all the fun because I was not on the keyboard. And what I did, I miss actually the honeypot, but the log analytics workspace back then was still in the retention period, and I was able to access the data, and I was able to see what the attacker did execute on the device. So first, the show version command is executed, and then a Cisco support user is added, as was indicated by the proof of concept published by Horizon 3. And after that, the IPv6 version vulnerability is being abused. So the not right implementation of the filter is not being is being abused to execute commands as root on the device. I was able to publish all the tag chain when after the user gets added and when the backdoor is being added to the device, and I will talk about a little bit later. Looking at the bugs, the first one, so the first patch that tried to address the first bug, which allowed a remote user to compromise device, was actually an introduced new header to the Lua frontend. So what Cisco wanted to make sure is that the post request comes from the Lua frontend to the backend and not directly to the client side. So when I did the patch diffing, I kind of naturally assumed that was probably some kind of server-side request forger or something like that, this kind of attack. But I didn't look into the binary patch diffing because the backend binary is huge, a few megabytes, and patch diffing is very difficult in that sense. So here I was in the dark, but the guys from Horizon 3 were able to catch the proof of concept, and you can see here the post requests that go directly to the backend. And it was kind of funny to see that you have a double URL encoded W, so web UI VSMA HTTP endpoint, and you just double encode with URL encoding schema and the first character, and you go past the Nginx filter, and you can directly hit the backend. it was kind of surprising that this kind of bugs are still around, and it was also surprising how the developer uh, 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 commented on the fix, but not on this one, the second one. So the second one, as I said, is filter bypass. So the IPv6 filter, which was poorly written. And here the developer was kind of pissed off because he assumed that, uh, I don't know what he assumed, but he said in the command, a cardinal rule for any validation is to assume that the input is invalid. So it's actually true, but I guess he was not that happy with introducing the patch fix to the devices for this vulnerability. Okay, so here on this URL, you can see the actual commands that are being executed after the Cisco support user is added to the device. I tried to post everything, but I stripped the base64 encoded through a backdoor. If you want, mm, if you want me to share it, you can reach me on the channels that I wrote, and I will happy to share it with you. But other than that, I think that all the comments are there. Although I lost because of the retention the whole data in my table. So you can see every step what the attacker did execute. And it's kind of funny because everything has been executed in few seconds. So it was around 15 to 20 seconds, and the device has been compromised. So what this means, they use some kind of automation. They scan the internet, and they just hit it with the exploit, and that's it. They didn't think about if the asset is valuable, if the asset is some kind of company private space. They just hit it and scan the internet and just try to exploit it. So that's the Lua backdoor, which you can see here. And of course, uh, for those who have been around for this bug and studied, uh, there were a lot of scripts published on GitHub where you try to, the scripts try to scan the devices based on the logon hash parameter equal to 1. And if you go for that subpage on the device, it will return a short content. And that's the way they try to identify if a device has been exploited. But as you can see here in the backdoor, there are actually quite a few authorization controls for the attackers, which they introduce by themselves. So basically, you would need to have an authorization token to use the backdoor, and of course, they checked if the authorization token, if the hash of the authorization token matches this hash, and then then you're allowed to execute the comments. So they implemented the authentication control on the backdoor also. Okay, so that was the whole chain of commands that are being executed on device when the attacker hit you and it plays the Lua backdoor. So we learned a lot of this, and everything what we learned, we incorporated into threat intelligence data, and of course, then you can use the threat intelligence data for detection and also prevention. Do you want one more? Okay, so probably you don't have a choice. I will go with one more. So The other use case where we stumbled about high fidelity threat intelligence in the wild was an incident response. What we tried to do was, of course, what you do in incident response, like trying to discover the patient zero, where the attack started, how much data has been exfiltrated, what data has been exfiltrated, are the attackers still present in the system, and things like that. And when we try to discover the exfiltration, it was surprisingly that we had a spike towards torrent sites of around 8 gigabytes of data from one endpoint. And there was no EDR alert triggered. Everything was fine on the system. We had one of the best EDRs on the system. We could look what has been executed, but there were no alerts. And the final result was the exfiltration of a memory dump. So the question was why? And memory dumping is kind of the discipline what you would do in a forensic investigation. You have legit tools that do it. You have a bunch of them, but not one of them has been used. So on the other side, we had the evidence. We know what has been executed and what kind of tool has been used. So the tool was dumped. That was acquired by this company, Magnet Forensics, in 2022, but the tool was around before. But the earlier version didn't produce a crash dump file, but meaning that the new version has been used. I mean, the tool is great. It does what it does. It can be used for forensic analysis, of course, but it can be also used for bad stuff. But the question is still, why would an attacker do memory dumping? What he can get out of this? Because he can blend into the operation what the good guys do. So you have the administrators, and the administrators, or you have incident responders, and when an incident happens, you do the memory dump, or I don't know in which situation would you do it. And what the attackers try to do is blend into the activities what normal people do. And they use it by a tool which is actually signed. So if you're a SOC analyst and you're looking only at unsigned binaries that are being executed, you're probably wrong, because the attacker is using a signed and legit tool. Memory dump gives you also good reconnaissance, meaning what processes are running, what's being executed, and if you're lucky, you can get passwords in clear text. So if someone introduces a password in the command line, you probably catch it with the memory dump, and then you can use it for further attacks. And because there is LSAS, so for those who don't know what LSAS is the main process that's responsible for Windows authentication. Every time you log in, LSAS takes care of everything, and that's why the process stores hashed credentials in memory, and you could get it. Of course, there are protections like credential guard and things like that where the hashes are encrypted and you cannot access it because they run in a different virtual-based level. So if you have virtual-based security enabled, they run on a different level, and you're not able to access the hashed version of the credentials, and you only have access to the encrypted one. But there are things around this, and let's assume that on this machine, credential guard was not installed. You have many techniques for doing credential dumping out of LSAS. That's a common technique where you just if you're a local administrator on the machine, you open up task manager and you create a dump file out of it. Then you transfer this dump file to the system offline, and you try to get out the passwords offline with a tool like Mimikatz. And that's a basic technique which the attackers do use, but those kind of techniques get discovered by today's modern EDRs. So we have many techniques for credential dumping, and it's always a cat and mouse game here. And let's talk again about the memory dump. So instead of doing a crash dump file or creating a crash dump, the memory dump out of LSAS, you do the whole memory dump and try to extract the part where LSAS resides out of it. Looking at what was available out of knowledge, I didn't find anything very useful. I only found one blog post that was talking about gathering credential based on different memory files and how you could extract the passwords out of this. And there were some great instruction, and of course the gentle Kiwi Benjamin Delpy thought of anything, and I don't know at which point in time he introduced the Mimilib library, but this library can be loaded into the WinDGB debugger, and it's able to extract the region or the hashed version of the passwords out of the memory dump. It's actually great that something like this is still possible, and of course, I will go with a demo. So we will do the step 1. Let me just share my virtual machine here. So basically what you see here is an Azure virtual machine, and here you can see crash dump files already created. So I'm going to use this memory composition tool, so dump it, and that's it. Basically, you hit yes or no, and that's it. The tool will create you a dump file and store it on, for example, on the desktop. I will click no because I don't want to waste processing power. I did it before. And I will try to do the credential dumping on the same machine. In a real attack, the attackers will exfiltrate the memory dump and do the credential dumping then offline. So I will try to open the crash dump file. Let's go with this one. Okay, so the crash dump file loaded, and I will try to load Mimikatz here. It's being loaded, and of course, now I need to find the address of the LSAS process, and the address is this one. So I will switch the context to this address, and then I will just try to hit oops, okay, not the right keyboard. I guess I will just copy paste it. Okay, so this could happen if you're doing live demos, but let's assume that this credential dump went through. That's the kind of procedure what you would do. I don't see where the bug is right now. Maybe I did not the right. Yeah, it should work, but never mind. I will show you the final output, which should look like this. So switching back here to the slides, the first step is kind of trivial. You just execute dump it and do the memory dump. Then you load Mimikatz and switch the process address to the LSAS process of the memory dump. And then you execute Mimikatz, as you can see here on the right side. and what you will get is the standard output of Mimikatz. So basically, this kind of exploitation did work, and this kind of exploitation was used to do credential dumping. So instead to go for the analysis process, the attacker did the whole memory dump with a signed and valid tool, exfiltrated the data, and did offline credential dumping at their premises. And what we can learn out of this is if someone is using a forensic tool on a machine to acquire a memory dump, it's probably not valid if it's not in forensic activities and incident response. And you as administrator or SOC analyst need to check why did this happen. So just the takeaways. When it comes to honeypots and setting up honeypot in the wild to catch high fidelity threat intelligence data, you need to be real as possible, and you need to be cautious to not expose too much, and you need to be patient. Expect the unexpected, as I didn't expect, and probably the attackers will hit you and out of office hours and some kind of holidays or Christmas and things like that. When it comes to incident response, you need to learn as much as possible from what the attackers did and try to incorporate the data into your detection and prevention capabilities. And everything out of this can get you high fidelity threat intelligence data. With this, I'm concluding my presentation and I'm thanking you for the time. So if there are any questions, just you can ask me on the chat.
Perfect. Thank you, Daniel.
No worries. It was my pleasure.
Well, let's see if there are any questions. In the meantime, thank you, Daniel, and thank you for watching. And remember to patch all your solutions as soon as a security update is available.
Yeah.